Welcome to the Baroque Violin Shop. My name is David Smorelli. I am the School Sales Coordinator here at BVS. We specialize in the rental, sales, and servicing of string instruments. Your school has provided the opportunity for you to learn a string instrument. This video will explore the string world, and you will learn what the different instruments look like and sound like. Here we are in the Baroque Violin Shop, also known as the Smith Jessup House. This was a Revolutionary War veterans home. You can see the old fireplace here behind me. And before we continue our journey into the string world, I'd like to introduce to you Mike Arnold and Joel Thompson. They're going to be joining me here in just a minute. And we're going to play in a trio, a string trio, and we're going to let you hear what the combination of instruments sound like, and then we'll proceed to show you each individual instrument.
Hi, I'm Mike, and you just heard me, David, and Joel play together on the violin, viola, and cello as a trio. So you've heard what these instruments can sound like together as a group, but we also want you to hear each one individually. So I'm going to start with the violin, the smallest member of the string family, and it plays the highest notes since it's the smallest one. Of course, it can play some lower notes too, like this is the lowest one. But it plays super, super high as well. And unlike woodwind, brass, and percussion instruments, the stringed instruments can be built in different sizes to match the size of the person who's playing on it. So as an example, we have here on the table all the different sizes of violins. Now violas and cellos and basses also come in various sizes too. But you can see from this size here, they get very, very small. This is for like a 2.5-year-old. Some children start that young. But you, as an elementary age student, would start on one of these sizes over here on this end. And then as you grow, you'd move up to the next bigger size. Now, a couple of different ways we can play the instrument, of course, is with the bow. But we also can just pluck the string with our finger. And that's called pizzicato. So when we play a couple more songs for you here in a little bit, you'll see us doing that, where we just pluck the string. And that's called, again, pizzicato. Now I want to play a couple of other things for you on the violin so you can hear what it can sound like. One of these melodies I think you'll recognize, especially if you're a Star Wars fan. So if you recognize that, you would know that's called the Imperial March, or another name for it is Darth Vader's theme. Now, you can use the violin to play all kinds of different styles of music, whether it's classical or jazz or pop or rock or country and western. So here's an example of that. And now I'm going to turn this over to David so he can talk to you about the viola.
So you've just heard Mike play the violin. Now we'd like to show you the viola. So the viola is sort of a cousin of the violin and looks very similar, but it actually is a little bit bigger. So when we compare them side by side, you can see that a full-size viola is bigger than a full-size violin. However, if you play violin or viola, there'll be a size to fit you. So we're going to play 3 of the strings that we share between the violin and the viola. So these 3 are the same. My highest 3 strings and his lowest 3 strings are the same. A, D, G, but Mike has a higher string, the E, and I have the lower string C on the viola. Next, I'd like to play for you a little bit on the viola. So in the orchestra, we have the violin, as you've heard already, and then we have the viola that I just compared to the violin. The viola is sort of the heart of the orchestra. They sort of sit in the middle. And if you like an instrument that maybe has a little bit lower sound, not as high as the violin, then the viola might be the instrument for you. So I'm going to play the 4 strings again so you can hear each one separately. And the viola, as with all the string instruments, are played with a bow, with real horsehair. And we can do some special effects with the bow on the viola. Perhaps you like scary movies. In a scary movie, you might hear something like this. So that's called a tremolo. We just simply move the bow back and forth very quickly. It kind of gives a sort of a scary sound to it. Another thing that we can do on the viola is a sound that maybe you've heard if you've ever watched the Roadrunner cartoon. So if you've ever seen that cartoon, you know that the coyote is always chasing the Roadrunner and never quite reaches him and never catches him. And most of the time what ends up happening is the coyote ends up falling off of a cliff. And you might hear this sound. And then in a puff of smoke, you see the coyote at the bottom of the canyon. Somehow in the next scene, he resurrects. I don't understand how that works, but it's a cartoon. So the viola can play a big variety of music, just like all the string instruments. And one thing that you often hear in a movie is background music and the themes of the movie. And this is a very famous movie that I'm sure you'll recognize. And I'm going to play the theme from that movie and see if you know what it is. So you probably recognize that from Harry Potter. That's the Hedwig's theme. And another thing that we can play on a string instrument is some pop music. So the This was a song that was popular a few years ago. You might recognize this. So that's the sound of the viola. We hope a number of you will want to play viola in your school orchestra. And now I'd like to pass it to Joel, who will be introducing our next instrument.
Hi, my name is Joel Thompson, and I'm a luthier here at the Broke Violin Shop. Luthier is a term used for people who work on stringed instruments. So I do a lot of repairs on violins, violas, and cellos. And today I'm going to play for you and demonstrate the cello, which is part of the violin family. It's much like a violin, but obviously a lot bigger, and we play sitting down. And what helps us play sitting down is what's called an end pin. It's this retractable rod here that comes right out the bottom. And my job in the orchestra is mostly to cover the bass side of the strings. So we play the lower ends. And we also read a different clef from the violins. We read the bass clef. Our tuning is the same as the viola, just an octave lower. We have C, G, D, and A. So as I said, a lot of our music that we play is going to be kind of the accompaniment line, lower end of the orchestra, to support the melody, but still a lot of recognizable tunes. So that's the theme from the movie Jaws, which I'm sure you recognize right away. But we also get to have some fun solos as well. And that's it for the cello.
So now you've heard the violin, the viola, and the cello. And you've heard a variety of music. You've heard some pop music, you've heard some fiddle music, you've heard some movie music. Now we'd like to bring the trio back and play for you a rock song. This is called Viva la Vida. It was made popular by a group named Coldplay.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So we have now come to the largest of the string instruments, sometimes called the granddaddy of them all, and that is the string bass. The bass has a lot of different names. It's called the bass, it's called the bass viol sometimes, it's called the bass fiddle, but it's all the same instrument. It's this large instrument, and as you can see, it's too large to put under my chin. It's really even too large to sit in a chair. Sometimes we use a stool to play the bass, or we'll stand up and play. We do use the bow with the bass, but a lot of times we'll just pluck it. You heard Mike earlier introduce pizzicato, and that's often something that we do with the bass. So I'm going to start off with pizzicato on the bass. So I'm going to pluck the 4 strings just so you can hear them. So as you can hear, they're very low sounds. In a country band, you might hear something that sounds like this. So we call that the slap bass. Or in a jazz band, you might hear a bass play something like this. So we call that the boogie woogie bass. So that's what the bass sounds like plucking it. Then if I use the bow, we can hear those low pitches again. And one of the first songs that you might learn if you join orchestra is this. So the bass is a very important instrument in the orchestra. It's sort of the foundation of the orchestra. And while there's not as many basses in an orchestra, it is a really important instrument. So we hope that there's some of you that'll be interested in playing the bass. Don't let the size scare you away. There are smaller size basses, one that will fit you. So we have one last instrument to show you. This instrument is not a part of the regular string orchestra, but should you learn to play the violin or viola or the cello or the bass, there are electric versions of all these instruments. I'm going to show you one of them today, and that's the electric violin. So if you wish to join a rock band and want to play electric violin and rock band, this would be the instrument for you. So one thing that's different about this electric violin than the violin that you saw earlier is it's a solid body instrument. So it's not hollowed out like the violin. So if I don't hook this up to this amplifier, it doesn't make much of a sound at all. So here's what it sounds like. So it doesn't have that body to amplify it like the acoustic violin. So the only way that this really sounds like a violin is to turn up the volume. I have it plugged into the amp here. So now it does sound like a violin, although it is being amplified. But I can change the sound of it and make it sound a little bit more like a guitar now. So what I've done is I've added distortion to the sound, and you can hear that it sounds a lot different. So you can have a lot of fun with these electric instruments. As I mentioned before, there's actually electric versions of all the instruments. So down the road, if you continue with your skills and continue to get better and better as a instrumentalist, then this might be in your future as well. So I hope you enjoyed that. So we're going to finish our presentation today by letting you hear the trio one more time, and I hope you enjoy our last number that we have for you. This is Beauty and the Beast. So I hope you enjoyed Beauty and the Beast, and I hope you enjoyed listening to each of the instruments that we presented today. You have an opportunity to join the orchestra. Your teacher can give you more details about that. But I did want to let you know that each instrument is important. Just like on a football team, you can't have an entire team of quarterbacks or just the offensive line. You need the whole team. That's the same way in orchestra, so it's important to have each instrument represented. So in a typical orchestra, the largest section is the violin section. It's actually broken into two. So there's a first violin section typically and a second violin section. So when you go to a symphony concert, you'll see that that's the biggest part of the orchestra. Violas is an instrument that's also a larger section, but it's not as large as the violin section. It's real important that we have that middle voice, as I mentioned before. And then the cello section, we need those lower end instruments, those lower sounds. And the lowest sound, of course, is the bass. And if you go to an orchestra concert, you'll notice that there's not as many basses. It's a larger instrument and you don't need quite as many, such as the violin. So I hope that you found an instrument that you really enjoyed the sound of. It's important that you like the sound. If you like it, then you're going to want to practice it. So I hope you have fun making up your mind and deciding what instrument you want to play. And we hope you enjoy the world of music.